You've heard this voice all over TikTok, but did you know a billion-dollar company spent years trying to ensure the world never heard from her again? This isn't just a sweet song. It's the start of a terrifying secret that the industry tried to bury forever. If you have scrolled through short-form video feeds at any point in the last year, you have undoubtedly encountered the infectious, bouncy rhythm of Pretty Little Baby. Influencers and everyday users alike lip-sync to the track, donning vintage dresses, applying bright red lipstick, and perfectly capturing an idealized, sanitized aesthetic of the late 1950s and early 1960s. Millions of people interact with this sound every single day, completely oblivious to the devastating nightmare that the woman behind the microphone was forced to endure. Understand the sheer magnitude of this tragedy and the subsequent corporate cover-up, you first have to understand the unparalleled cultural dominance of Connie Francis. She was not just a singer, she was a global phenomenon. Long before the era of digital streaming, international world tour, and instant viral fame, Connie Francis was quietly cementing herself as the top-selling female recording artist of her time. She dominated the Billboard charts with a relentless string of hits. She possessed an unparalleled work ethic, recording her vocals in multiple languages including Italian, Spanish, German, and Japanese, which allowed her to conquer international markets in a way that no other American pop star had ever successfully achieved. She was the pristine, untouchable sweetheart of the global music industry, a symbol of post-war innocence. But the music industry has a profound talent for chewing up its most lucrative stars, and the innocence of that era was entirely manufactured. By the time the 1970s rolled around, the cultural landscape of America had violently shifted. The bubblegum pop of the early 60s had given way to a darker, more cynical era. Yet, Connie Francis continued to work relentlessly, pivoting her career toward live performances and maintaining a grueling touring schedule. It was during this phase of her career, specifically in November of 1974, that she booked a performance at the Westbury Music Fair in New York. After a triumphant return to the stage, the superstar retreated to her room at a local Howard Johnson's Motor Lodge. In today's world, it might seem utterly baffling that an international music icon with millions of records sold would be staying at a roadside motel. But the culture of touring was different then, and the lodge was conveniently located near the venue. More importantly, lodging chains like Howard Johnson's had spent tens of millions of dollars on massive advertising campaigns designed to convince the American public that their iconic orange roofs were a universal symbol of safety, comfort, and middle-class security. But right here is where you need to completely forget everything you think you know about how the world works. You might assume this is merely a tragic story about a random, horrific act of violence, the kind of isolated true crime tale that saturates the internet. But that is exactly what the corporate executives sitting in their pristine boardrooms wanted the public, the press, and the police to believe. The truth is far more sinister. The incident that was about to occur was not a random stroke of bad luck. It was the direct, undeniable result of a calculated mathematical decision made by a multi-million-dollar corporation that decided human lives were worth less than the cost of a few pieces of metal. What the executives at the very top of Howard Johnson's knew about that specific motel, and what they desperately tried to conceal from a jury, would trigger a legal bloodbath that completely revolutionized the way every single person on Earth sleeps at night. This wasn't just a crime. It was a massive corporate cover-up of lethal negligence. When Connie Francis returned to her room on that fateful night, she locked the door and went to sleep, trusting the security of the establishment. But the lock on her sliding glass patio door was fundamentally useless. A terrifyingly simple manipulation of the glass was all it took for an intruder to break into her room. What followed was a horrific, prolonged attack that lasted nearly 3 hours. She was assaulted, held at knife point, and suffocated under the weight of a heavy mattress. The physical and psychological destruction inflicted upon her in that room is almost incomprehensible. When she was finally discovered by the police, the pristine image of the global pop superstar was completely shattered. She was freezing, severely traumatized, and entirely alone in a room that was supposed to be a secure sanctuary. In the immediate aftermath, the hospitality industry expected her to do what most victims in the 1970s were pressured into doing: retreat into the shadows, stay quiet, and let the authorities handle it quietly. Women of that era, especially public figures, were routinely subjected to horrific victim blaming by the media and the legal system. The expectation was that a public trial would be too humiliating, too damaging to her wholesome brand, and she would simply fade away to protect her legacy. But Connie Francis refused to be silenced by the very system that failed her. Instead of fading away, she hired incredibly aggressive legal representation and filed a monumental lawsuit against the Howard Johnson's Corporation, completely bypassing the individual attacker who was never definitively caught, and aiming directly at the systemic failure of the billion-dollar entity that enabled the crime. She alleged gross negligence. During the brutal discovery phase of the trial, the terrifying secret that the corporation tried to bury finally saw the light of day. Her legal team uncovered deeply disturbing evidence that the management at the Howard Johnson's Lodge was entirely aware that their sliding glass doors were completely unsecure. Even worse, they discovered that there had been a documented history of break-ins, burglaries, and assaults on the property long before Connie Francis ever checked in. The corporate executives knew their guests were sitting ducks. They had been warned by security experts that the flimsy locks on the patio doors could be bypassed from the outside by anyone with a screwdriver and a few seconds of free time. The solution to this fatal flaw was devastatingly simple. Upgrading the locks, installing simple deadbolts, or placing an inexpensive metal bar in the track of the sliding door would have made the rooms virtually impenetrable from the outside. The cost to implement these life-saving security measures amounted to roughly $2.50 per room. Let that sink in. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, the corporation could have prevented the destruction of a woman's life. But they did nothing. They ran a terrifying cost-benefit analysis and decided that paying out the occasional small insurance claim for stolen luggage was cheaper than upgrading the security across their entire massive chain of roadside motels. When these internal communications and documented warnings were presented in court, the jury was absolutely horrified. The defense desperately tried to shift the blame, utilizing every corporate legal tactic available to protect their profit margins, but the evidence of their systemic negligence was too overwhelming. Connie Francis was awarded $2.5 million, which was an absolutely astronomical, unprecedented sum for a premises liability lawsuit at that time. It was a historic landmark verdict that sent a massive shockwave through the entire global hospitality industry. The rippling effects of this single lawsuit completely changed the modern world. Before Connie Francis took the stand, hotels and motels operated under the archaic legal assumption that they were only responsible for the basic shelter of their guests, not their physical security against third-party criminals. After her victory, the legal standard was violently ripped apart and rewritten. Every time you check into a hotel room today and slide a heavy metal deadbolt into place, every time you look through a wide-angle peephole to see who is knocking, every time you use a secure electronic keycard instead of a flimsy metal key, and every time you see a security camera monitoring a hotel hallway, you are directly experiencing the legacy of Connie Francis. The industry was forced, under the agonizing threat of massive financial ruin, to finally prioritize human life over marginal profit. But victories in a courtroom rarely translate to healing in the human mind. The aftermath of the trial and the attack left an indelible, devastating mark on her life that money could never possibly fix. The psychological trauma was so profound, so deeply embedded in her nervous system, that she developed a devastating medical condition known as psychogenic aphonia. Her brain, completely overwhelmed by the unrelenting horror of her experience, literally shut down her vocal cords. For years, the woman who possessed one of the most recognizable, celebrated, and lucrative singing voices on the entire planet could not sing a single note. She struggled to even speak above a faint, strained whisper. The industry that had profited wildly from her talent for decades quietly moved on, leaving her isolated in a horrific prison of trauma and silence. As if the universe had not exacted enough of a toll, her life continued to spiral into unimaginable darkness. In 1981, just as she was slowly beginning to piece her shattered mental state back together, her beloved brother George was brutally assassinated in a highly publicized mafia-style contract killing. The grief from this profoundly violent execution completely broke whatever fragile stability she had managed to build. She descended into severe manic depression, resulting in multiple forced institutionalizations in psychiatric hospitals throughout the 1980s. She was subjected to brutal, outdated psychiatric treatments, completely stripped of her autonomy and locked away from the public eye. The bright, smiling star who once sang Pretty Little Baby was trapped in a living nightmare that stretched on for decades. When you look back at her story, the true tragedy is how quickly society is willing to completely disconnect the art from the profound suffering of the artist. The internet possesses an incredible power to resurrect the past, to turn forgotten melodies into massive global trends, but it frequently does so by stripping away all the vital, agonizing human context. We consume these retro aesthetics as disposable entertainment, rarely pausing to consider the heavy price paid by the people who created them. Connie Francis was a pioneer who survived the darkest depths of human cruelty and corporate greed. She took on a billion-dollar machine and forced it to change, single-handedly rewriting the laws of security and liability to ensure that no one else would ever have to endure the nightmare she lived through. So the next time you are scrolling through your phone, completely lost in a sea of short videos, and you hear the bouncing, retro melody of Pretty Little Baby echoing from your speaker, remember that you are not just listening to a catchy, forgotten relic of the past. You are listening to the voice of an absolute warrior. And if you think the hospitality industry is the only massive corporate entity hiding a dark history of suppressing victims for profit, wait until you hear how the modern music streaming giants are currently covering up the exact same behaviors today. But that is a dark secret for another video.